All right, so you're finally ready to tackle those home improvement projects, and you need a saw that can handle anything.
A saw that can power through any material you throw at it,
Yeah, exactly. Something tough.
like a workhorse of a tool.
You're probably even picturing it in your mind right now.
You're thinking, I need a Sawzall for this.
But hold on a second. Is it actually a Sawzall you need?
Or is this a job for the wider world of reciprocating saws?
Good question. It seems like everyone uses those terms interchangeably.
And it's easy to see why people get confused. Luckily, the article you found dives right into that.
And I have to say, I love it when we get to debunk some myths right out of the gate. And this article does not disappoint. It says right here, Sawzall isn't even a type of saw.
Wait, what? Really?
I know, right? Total mind blow. Sawzall is actually a trademarked brand name.
Huh. So it's like Band-Aid or Xerox?
Yes, exactly. Those are all brand names that have become synonymous with the product itself. But we're in the know now. So who do we have to thank for bringing the first reciprocating saw into the world?
Let me guess. Black & Decker.
Nope. It was actually Milwaukee back in 1951.
Wow, 1951. That's going way back. What was going on back then that would have even created a need for a powerful saw like that?
Well, I did some digging, and it turns out that the post-World War II era was a time of major construction and industrial growth. New buildings were going up left and right, infrastructure was being rebuilt, manufacturing was booming. They needed some serious tools to keep up with all that.
Ah, so Milwaukee really hit the nail on the head with their timing. This new demand for heavy-duty tools probably helped them become as popular as they are now. And speaking of Milwaukee, the article mentioned a feature on the original Sawzall that really set it apart at the quick-look blade clamp. Do you remember those old tools where you needed like a wrench to change the blade?
Ooh, don't remind me. Changing the blade on my grandfather's old saw was a nightmare.
Yeah, well, the quick-look system changed all of that. It made it possible to change blades quickly and easily, no extra tools needed. It sounds like a small thing now, but back then, that was revolutionary.
Oh, totally. That's huge. It's like the jump from a rotary phone to a smartphone. So it sounds like Milwaukee set a pretty high bar with that first Sawzall. But let's back up for a second and talk about reciprocating saws more generally. What makes them so versatile?
Well, this article calls it an outstanding tool, and it's not hard to see why.
I mean, they can cut through just about anything, right? Wood, metal, plastic, you name it.
Exactly. It's like the Swiss Army knife of saws.
Yeah.
And they're not just limited to demolition work either, although they obviously excel at that. But I've seen them used for everything from pruning trees to cutting through drywall.
It's all thanks to that aggressive back and forth blade movement. It gives them some serious power.
It's like a regular handsaw, but with way more force behind it.
Yeah, like it's been hitting the gym.
Yeah, it's like they hooked it up to a motor or something.
Right. Speaking of motors, that actually brings us to our next point. How about we talk about the different ways to power these things?
Good point. Because a saw this versatile needs a power source to match.
And there are more options than you might think, right?
Absolutely. This article does a good job of outlining the main ones. First, you've got your classic corded models.
The old reliables.
Right. Those offer steady power, but they can be kind of a pain if you're working far away from an outlet. You're tethered to that cord.
Literally a drag sometimes.
Exactly. But on the other hand, we've got the cordless revolution.
Battery-powered reciprocating saws have really come a long way.
Oh yeah, for sure. They are so much lighter and easier to move around. Plus, the batteries themselves have gotten so much better, like way more power, and they hold a charge longer.
The article even mentions some batteries can hold a charge for months, which is kind of wild.
That is pretty impressive.
So convenient. But hey, if you're listening and you're thinking about going cordless, here's a pro tip from yours truly. If you already have other cordless tools from a specific brand, check if those batteries will work with their reciprocating saws too.
That's a really good point. You don't want to end up with a drawer full of different chargers for all your different tools.
Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster, I swear. But no matter which power source you go with, corded or cordless, there is another really important factor that a lot of people forget about.
The blade.
You know it. A saw is only as good as its blade. And honestly, I had no idea there was so much to learn about these things until I read this article. It's a whole world.
You're telling me. It's easy to get lost in all the details. But never fear, we're here to break it down for you. First up, you've got blade length.
Which can really run the gamut, it seems like.
Totally. We're talking anywhere from a tiny 3-inch blade to a monstrous 12-incher.
12 inches, that's longer than a foot-long sub. What kind of job would even need a blade that big?
Well, generally speaking, the longer the blade, the deeper the cut you can make.
Oh, that makes sense.
So yeah, for thick pieces of wood, logs, big pipes, You're going to want to use a longer blade. Shorter blades are better for more delicate work, when you need to be more precise.
Gotcha. But the length is just the beginning, right? The article also mentions something called TPI, which stands for teeth per inch. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds a little too much like a trip to the dentist.
Oh, yeah, not my favorite association either. But it's a good analogy, because it really is all about those little chompers. Picture a row of teeth on the blade. The TPI basically tells you how many teeth are packed into 1 inch of space.
So more teeth means what exactly?
A higher TPI means a smoother, finer cut.
And if I'm going for more of a rough cut,
Lower TPI, fewer teeth, but those teeth are bigger and more aggressive.
so it's all about finding the right tool for the job, as always.
Exactly. Think of it like this. Would you use a machete to perform surgery?
I mean, I wouldn't.
Probably not the best idea. Same principle here. You wouldn't use a high TPI blade to try to cut through a concrete block, right? Speaking of concrete blocks, the article did mention that reciprocating saws aren't really known for their precision.
I was going to say, they're definitely more about brute strength than delicate detail work.
Exactly. They're fantastic at making fast, rough cuts, especially through stubborn materials. But if you need a super precise cut, there are much better saws out there for that.
So to recap, we've covered power sources, blade selection, and we've established that reciprocating saws are the power lifters of the saw world.
You could say that.
But at the end of the day, it all boils down to one question: which saw is right for the job at hand?
Which is exactly what our listener is trying to figure out.
And we want to make sure our listener has all the info they need before they head to the hardware store. So what are some of the big things to keep in mind when you're comparing different models?
Well, the article made a good point about brand loyalty. Like if you've already got a bunch of cordless tools from one brand.
Like if you're already all in on DeWalt or whatever.
Exactly. Then it might make sense to just stick with that brand for your reciprocating saw too, especially if the batteries are interchangeable.
Makes sense to me. No one wants to be digging around for 5 different chargers every time their tools die. Plus, if you've already got a brand you know and love, why not stick with them? But okay, let's say our listener is open to anything. What other factors should they be thinking about?
Well, budget is always going to be a factor.
Always.
But other than that, it really comes down to their own individual needs. Are they prioritizing durability? Do they need something that's lightweight?
Or maybe they're looking for something with a few more bells and whistles.
Like what?
I don't know, maybe some fancy model with built-in LED lights or something.
You know, there are some really tricked out saws out there. It's all about finding the saw that fits your needs and your workflow. And this article really emphasizes that there's no single right answer. It depends on what you're looking for.
That's good advice for just about anything, right? Find what works for you. Well, we've covered a ton of ground in this deep dive, busted some myths, dug into some history, decoded a bunch of technical terms. Any final words of wisdom from the article that our listeners should remember when they're out shopping for their next saw?
Yeah, there was one thing I found really interesting. It turns out that a lot of experienced tradespeople can tell what kind of saw someone is using just by the sound it makes.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Like they know if it's a Sawzall or a DeWalt or whatever, just from the sound.
So it's not even about how it looks or feels, it's the sound of the saw itself.
Exactly. Each one has its own unique sound signature.
That's wild. Okay, so to our listeners, the next time you're walking by a construction site, close your eyes and really listen to those saws.
You might surprise yourself with what you can identify.
That's amazing. Well, I think it's safe to say that this has been an ear-opening episode, to say the least. We've gone from what is a Sawzall to I can recognize a reciprocating saw just by its sound. I'd say that's pretty impressive.
I'd say our listeners well on their way to becoming a true saw aficionado.
That's right. So to our listeners out there, go forth and choose your saw wisely. And remember, whether you end up with a Sawzall or some other brand of reciprocating saw, the important thing is that it helps you get the job done.
Hear, hear.
Until next time, happy sawing.